Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Miette, INSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, tire siping, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we're going to cover all the home teams, Saints, LSU, Tulane, UNO, touch on the Pelicans as well. We got a lot to cover here from our Pontchartrain Production Studios, and one of the best we have in the city. I say he's a sports encyclopedia. I mean, have you listened to his show, All Access, on Tuesday nights? Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com, 106.1 FM, and of course the voice of UNO basketball is our guest today, and one of my favorite guests here on the program. Jude, how are you today, bud?
Doing great, man. Good to be here with you as always.
Jude, before we get started, tell everybody what you guys are into. I know we got your basketball, your baseball classic coming up for Crescent City Sports. Let me lay it out there for you. Give it a chance to tell us all about it.
CrescentCitySports.com. We're busy year-round. There's no slow season for us because high school baseball championships are happening right now, but we are once again the host of the big local summer league called the Crescent City Sports Prep Summer League. So baseball for all the underclassmen that'll be playing baseball next year. They're playing right now in some of these state title games locally. We will have them. We'll have a game of the week featured as a stream on our site and a 4-team championship round as well. So we're excited about that, and we want to thank all the high school baseball programs that have joined us again to be involved with that, to fill a gap that there's been some issues as far as having a league that allows people to be able to play on the weekends. Travel ball is so important for player development, where we were able to sort of split the difference and have a midweek sort of league so that these teams can develop together with their high school teammates. So that's very important, and obviously there's always been a lot of interest in that. There's a rich tradition going back more than a century of not just high school baseball, but summer baseball involving schools, as well as my typical involvement on 106.1 FM, part of our All Access block that follows your show Inside New Orleans, 6 to 7 o'clock. I'll have every Tuesday, and during the summer I fill in a little bit more for Ken Trahan when he's off and about handling some of these baseball duties. And I am the voice of UNO basketball, but it's the off season now, and as a matter of fact they're almost done, which is really rare in this day and age. They have a lot of returning players. They're almost done filling out their roster for next year. One more player they expect to be able to sign when it's all said and done, and I know Will Wade and McNeese are drawing a lot of attention in the Southland Conference, and rightfully so with the players that he's bringing in. But the Privateers are going to be a championship contender, and I know Mark Schlesinger and the gang are excited about that, and I'm excited to get there once we're back into it in the fall.
There you go. And of course, CrescentCitySports.com. I think, again, when you love local sports, going back to, again, how the newspaper used to be, where, you could go in and you could find out what's going on with your local teams. Crescent City Sports is the way to go. And I would put it as one of my favorites. I look at it every single day. Great writers. A lot of those guys are on this program, the radio show. I recommend it highly. I want to go back to the baseball for a minute because I grew up with, again, Rag Sherman and his group going to Johnstown, right?
And the Delgado program still connected with the New Orleans Boosters.
Right?
They do that, which is great on the college level. You know,
and then, of course, American Legion ball for so many years.
That's sort of taken a hit. Nobody really participates other than Jesuit because of their tradition. They've stuck with it, and they're sort of splitting their time with our league in order to stay involved. But other than that, there's just no local American Legion in the New Orleans area anymore, and that's a shame. It just didn't work out flexibility-wise with the needs of the kids.
So y'all feel a void now?
Yeah, we do. We do, and we just knew it was important after speaking to some high school coaches. Look, Frank Cazzo at Rummel, state championship winning coach, multiple spots. He was the one who approached us and said, look, we've got an idea. Can you help us make this happen? Because it's very important for the development of our players so that we can oversee the development of our players, that we have this summer ball still intact. We can't let it all slip away, whether it was American Legion or Metro. Now this fills the gap. As a matter of fact, we'll even have JV games before the varsity games, so to speak, in the Crescent City Sports Prep Summer League. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, and look, again, I've discussed it on my program. You've discussed it for years. You know, the baseball starts early in Louisiana, obviously, again, with the little leagues, and then, of course, you move up into the junior high school, a lot of the traveling teams now. It's one of the reasons why we see such great baseball midweek here in Louisiana, where you can have Nichols go out and beat the #1 team in the nation, LSU, because we have such great baseball here. The coaches, that start from very, very young into the high school ranks. I mean, we're really blessed here.
There's no doubt, and we just talk about the South and my connection. They're having 5 Louisiana schools in that league because of the strength of local baseball. Most of those rosters are stocked with Louisiana talent, and certainly South Louisiana talent in particular. I know Southeastern's having a down year, but they're an annual contender and dangerous when they reach the NCAA tournament. McNeese has such a strong program on the opposite side of the South part of the state. Obviously, UNO and what Blake Dean has been able to do to compete year in, year out. They're having another fine season. All these teams looking at 30-plus win seasons, and Nichols has invested a little bit more in baseball, and they're in first place right now. So you have that. You have the strength of Louisiana Lafayette. Obviously, LSU's a powerhouse. Tulane, we know they're having issues right now, but they certainly do have the ability to be a program that competes on a national level. So considering the size of the state, it tells you how impressive the developmental level of the game must be.
Let's stay there. We'll start with college baseball today. We'll get into the Saints in the second block. LSU 38-10, 16-7 overall, now #2 in the nation behind Wake Forest, and a guy we know pretty good, over there that's coaching. #2 in the SEC West, lost their first SEC series to Auburn last weekend, Mississippi State this weekend, and at Georgia next weekend to round out the SEC schedule before the SEC tournament. The big talker this week on my program, I'm sure we talked about it on Tuesday, it's been on CrescentCitySports.com, pitching. Right. Now, we've talked about pitching all year long for LSU. Can they find the second starter? Is their staff good enough that they could, augment not having that true number 2 starter and doing it by committee going forward, especially when you get into tournament play? I'll ask you. You've seen a lot of LSU baseball. Skeens is the best pitcher, one of the best pitchers in the country, if not the best. But after that, there's a huge drop-off. Talk a little bit about, again, everybody believes they can hit their great hitting team. They're not as good of a fielding team as they were last year, but you're looking at a situation now where, again, pitching is a question mark.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and Paul Skeens is the best pitcher in the country. He's going to be a top 5, top 3 overall pick. He'll be edged out probably by Dylan Cruz, his own teammate, who's the best position player in the country. So there's your foundation of why this team's been #1 or #2 all season long. But yes, they've been hard hit by injuries. They thought they were going to have much more pitching depth, many more options as far as those weekend starters go, and they haven't had it. Ty Floyd has been their second starter all year long, and he's been relatively consistent, but he's certainly not dominant. And after that, there's a huge question mark as to who's going to fill in there. I would argue that as we see what Jay Johnson plans to do this weekend against Mississippi State, they want to be able to use Thatcher Hurd again, who was hoped to be the second starter when he transferred from UCLA, as the third starter, but he's been valuable as a closer the last couple weeks. So if he's not used on the first 2 days of the series, and a lot of teams do this in college college baseball. This isn't uncommon. Then he would start the third game. He hasn't stretched out to prove he can go deep in the games this year and be consistent, but he's had to change his delivery because when he came from UCLA, he had missed most of last season after being dominant early because of a rare condition as far as lower back and in the spine, and the stress issue that he had to basically change a little bit the way he pitches to take and relieve a little bit of the pressure off of that area. So when you do that, it changes your whole mechanics. So having that consistency not only from pitch to pitch, but type of pitch to pitch has been a real struggle for him, and he's danced in and out of that consistency. Now in short relief, you're much more likely to rely on a couple pitches, so you can get away with that a little bit more, especially if you're finding the zone. Can he go deeper into games? I think he would be a real important part of LSU going all the way at this point, pitching a lot of innings. If he doesn't, I don't know if they have enough of the arms once they get to Omaha, much less if they were to fall into a loser's bracket situation. They can slug their way through theoretically, but once you play the better teams in the country, like we've seen in SEC games, as the season goes along, it gets more and more difficult if you don't have pitching depth.
It's a pitcher's park now, right?
It is, but college baseball this year, it's very clear that the baseballs that they're using are carrying further. We're seeing more home runs. We're seeing higher scores as a result. So that'll help LSU. They're certainly capable of outslugging people. They've got a few guys that have gone into a little bit of a lull lately in their lineup behind Cruz, but not Tommy White. Gavin Dugas suffered from a hit by a pitch that took him out of play, and he hasn't been quite the same since then as a table setter. But Trey Morgan's one of your better just contact hitters in the country. They can stack a lineup with power as well. I still think they can slug their way through a lot of situations, but are they going to be able to get to Omaha, and then when they get there and they don't keep winning and they have to bounce back in the loser's bracket, will they have enough pitching? That's going to remain the question, and they're going to have to piece it together, I think.
I know there was a concerted effort to make sure they had a solid staff. Is it injuries? Is the guys not living up to
It's a combo, but it's injuries first and foremost because they've lost several for the season. Look, it happens. It's baseball, it's pitchers, it's Tommy John. You know, UCL injuries are just so common at this point, much less having issues with shoulders, whatnot. It can be anything. So they've been hurt badly there, but the funny thing is I think they've had like 10 shutouts this year. Some of that in midweek where SEC talent dominates lower leagues, but at the same time, they've had success in league as well. It's just throwing strikes for the guys that are available. There's still enough arm talent there, but it just hasn't been consistent. You've had guys like Christian Little, for example, go from closer to third starter to now are they even going to use him on the weekends, the transfer from Vandy. He has the arm talent, not consistent throwing strikes. You know, Bryce Collins has worked his way up, transferred from Arizona with Johnson, has a great breaking ball. They can use him, but they weren't planning on using true freshman Gavin Guidry, who was the best high school player in the state last year. He was supposed to be a middle infielder, a shortstop, who also pitches, and now they're having to use him in crucial situations because they simply have gone deeper into their staff than they ever imagined. And still, they're one of the favorites to win it all, which tells you how talented they are in the end.
No doubt about it. Nichols is leading the Southland at 28-19, 12-6. Texas A&M Corpus Christi this weekend finish up against the Privateers at Privateer Park next week. Your thoughts on the Colonels?
It's impressive. I haven't gotten a chance to see them yet, obviously, except for a piece of their upset midweek win over LSU. And you can take some of that with a grain of salt. LSU also had, that was when Dugas was hurt. I believe White sat out of that game as well, so that makes a big difference. And there was some good fortune to go Nichols' way, but they're playing good baseball. And what they have is they have consistency in their pitching staff. And when they go to their bullpen, they have several guys who come in and there's these words again, throw strikes. That's been the key to their success. They've just had the most consistent team in the Southland so far in a league that's very competitive from top to bottom. Nobody good enough to be an at-large candidate, but all of them are very competitive, and I think a UNO can certainly make a run. McNeese hosting the tournament will be tough to deal with in Lake Charles. All three of those are looking pretty good right now, along with Northwestern State. That may have the most overall pitching as far as depth of guys you can throw out there and can get you an inning of good work when you need it. So I'm excited to see how that plays out. But Nichols, if they can finish this thing off and win the league, that's a huge step forward. They've got a multi-million-dollar facility being built right now for baseball. When they were considered and also ran in baseball that wasn't investing in the product, Jonathan Terrell, the AD, has done a great job there putting these projects together in all sports, and it's really already starting to show for the baseball program.
UNO 29-9 in the league right now. They're sixth. They're at UIW this weekend, and they finish up, as mentioned, Nichols at home to close out the regular season. Your thoughts on the Privateers' chance of again winning the Southland tournament and getting into again a regional?
Well, they really need to finish up strong because they play second place UIW and then first place Nichols to finish things off. So they're not even guaranteed right now to be in the Southland tournament. It's 7 total teams, but winning 2 out of 3 against HCU this past weekend was huge for them because HCU was behind them in the standings, now further behind. Privateers have the tiebreaker, so they're a little bit closer to being in what is a play-in game to what will be a full 16 double elimination bracket. But the day before that starts for the conference tournament, 6 and 7 have to play in a single elimination deal. Right now the Privateers' goal is not only to guarantee they qualify, but try to get into that top 5 and avoid that because their pitching depth is questionable, like so many teams. If they had to play that extra game, even if they get through it, it's just asking a whole lot in 1 week in that sort of format. But they do have Brandon Mitchell, who's been a 2-time conference pitcher of the week, can go deep into games. If they can get Tyler LeBlanc, who was supposed to be their ace early in the year, just back the last couple of weeks to pitch the way he did last season, and they could have that 1-2 punch, that would go a long way for their chances to be able to make a postseason run. Because, as you know, if you're playing in the regular double elimination bracket, if you can win those first 2 games, you're in the driver's seat to get to a final where anything goes. And it would help if the Privateers had those 2 guys healthy and pitching well at the same time.
Tulane is 14-34, 7-11 in the conference, 7th in the AAC. Houston this weekend at Memphis to finish out the regular season. They would have to win the conference tournament to have any shot. And it doesn't look like that's in the cards based on what we've seen this season, right?
It's hard to estimate because I think that conference has the chance to be so wide open in the postseason because East Carolina doesn't look as dominant as they were expected to be, and after that there's a drop-off. The teams are much closer in talent. ECU hasn't been that team, so I'm not going to completely count Tulane out if they go into that with no pressure. They made a run last year into the semifinals with all the turmoil of having an interim coach, having Travis Jewett fired late in the season. So anything goes. because they have enough talent if the guys could just put a good week together that it wouldn't shock me at all if they won that thing in the American. At the same time, it doesn't feel like that's going to happen. They just seem to find ways to lose games. Some games they don't hit. Sometimes they build leads and the bullpen loses it. They make mistakes in the field. I don't think they're very strong and consistent defensively. So when you put all those things together, there's so many different problems that it would be shocking if they put it all together, but not totally surprising considering I just don't feel like their league is one where you can count anybody out once you get to the postseason.
Delgado, once again, another region championship for them. Talk about the Dolphins and their prospects of winning it all.
Well, trying to be able to win it all in junior college, there's a plus and minus to what COVID has done to the JUCO level when you're having older, more mature, deeper junior college teams. The plus is you're going to have the best talent that you've had, and we've certainly seen that from Sherman's team this year. But at the same time, so do the other powers that you have to deal with along the way. They're going to this regional where Crowder is a school that's loaded with talent that cranks out high major players on the college level and pro talent. So they're an underdog going into that, but they do have the depth and quality that they are very confident that they can go there and compete next weekend, and I'm certainly rooting for them. It's just so hard when you go along the line of how JUCO ball has gotten stronger and stronger, and here's the key advantage everybody has to understand who doesn't follow it that closely. All these guys are looking for their best pro prospects going from high school to college. If you go the JUCO route, you only have to stay in JUCO 2 years before you're draft eligible, versus 3 years if you go major college route. So you get a lot of talent, and when I see some of these JUCO teams, when I see Delgado, I know Delgado could roll over and compete and maybe even win the Southland if they play their best, and they're not even the best JUCO program right now in the state. LSU Eunice on the Division II level is an absolute powerhouse. They had success against Delgado in series this year again. it's ridiculous what Jeff Willis has done there. So that just shows you, when you watch that, and they don't get much attention, just how strong JUCO ball is nowadays. It's hard to win and make those runs to championships.
There you go. Jude Young is our guest. We're going to shift gears here to the Pelicans before we go to our break at the bottom of the hour. Pels obviously sitting out the postseason, especially after so much. You know, everybody was excited in January about the prospects of maybe winning the West, at least winning the division. As they take a look at their team now, the one thing that I think a lot of us have been talking about is outside shooting.
Yes.
And athletic bigs. Do you agree with that? And what do you anticipate happening in this offseason?
I think the search for both of those needs probably top of the list. But even right now, before we get to that point, you've got coaches on the staff that are interviewing for other jobs, even head coaching jobs. You've got a need, I think, for the staff itself to maybe better fit Willie Green as far as having the right people working with him, particularly as far as getting the most you can offensively out of whatever roster you have. Because at this point, the Pelicans need to plan a little bit more for expecting Zion Williamson not to be there, even Brandon Ingram to not be there. And what's plan B? What type of team are we going to be when that happens? So more preparation for that, I'm sure, is in their minds now. And the easiest way to do that is you need to score to win in the NBA. It's a league built on spacing and shooting, and they need to do a better job of putting a roster together where they have more options as far as people who can shoot the basketball. And you can be a little bit less locked down, a little bit more lax defensively on the flip side if you have more athletic big guys who can rebound and defend the rim defensively. If you have guys, look, 3-and-D became a key term as far as basketball's evolution because of the outside shooting component. You need 3-and-D wings, you need 3-and-D bigs, I think, to put the best possible roster together. And that doesn't mean that Jonas Valanciunas isn't a good ball player, but maybe you could upgrade there as far as your team needs. Not that he isn't somebody that can help you win, but salary that he makes, not a good rim defender. Yes, he's a good rebounder, and you would have to replace that. So see, just one player talking about strengths and weaknesses, it's going to be delicate as far as how they approach the roster. But they do need to add shooting. And whether they use the pick and keep the player or not, their first-round pick needs to bring some sort of shooter back into the building, whether it's the player they draft or if they're using that as part of a trade. I think it all comes down to right now they need to have 2 or 3 more players on their 15-man roster who can come in and help you space the floor to make things easier on your other players. But yes, the injuries to their top 2 stars and Jose Alvarado, you know, we can't stress enough how important he is as far as a second unit guy who, when he's hot, can help you win games. Missing all those guys is a big, big deal, with CJ McCollum also playing hurt with the thumb injury when he's a shooter and it's on his shooting hand. So it couldn't have gone worse for the Pels after they were the #1 team in the West a couple months into the season. People are disappointed, but the front office, just like I'd recommend to the fans, relax. If things go right, look what it's done. I hate to point out the Lakers. Pelican fans don't want to hear this.
You can change the team, though.
If you can change the team with the right deals, the right complementary players, if your stars are healthy and available. So until we get to that point, don't count this team out, because we haven't seen it, but that doesn't mean we won't see them all healthy and play together.
You look at the Lakers and you say, okay, LeBron, one of the greatest of all time. Some believe he is the greatest of all time. You look at Anthony Davis, who again is a perennial all-star. And then you look at the Pelicans and you say maybe what Zion could be if healthy, Brandon Ingram, and you can say to yourself, okay, we can do the same thing. We can change this roster very quickly, much like the Lakers did, in surrounding those 2 players with again, players that play defense, that can score from the outside, that complement with the players that the Pelicans have now to do. The key is, again, for the Lakers, they'll go over the luxury tax. Okay? In New Orleans, that hasn't happened yet. That's going to be one of the things that is going to have to be discussed. We were told by David Griffin that Mrs. Benson has said that she's willing to go over the luxury tax if they're in contention for a championship. They look very close, by January of this past year, until they were beset by injuries. A couple questions. One of the talkers has been that Willie Green needs a former head coach next to him to help him in in-game game planning. Do you agree with that?
I don't think it necessarily has to be a former head coach, but you need somebody that's your right-hand coach, man or woman, that you can trust strategically as far as how do we need to shape the lineup in this situation? How can we ad-lib versus what we plan to do going into this game, and how injuries and how the game's been played requires you to make changes on the fly. You can't be static in what you do and say, this is our game plan, we're going to roll with this. These are the guys we're going to roll out here these minutes. That won't work in the NBA, especially when you're missing key stars. When your stars are there, you can play the way you play and have that luxury. So having somebody on the bench maybe that he would listen to a little bit more, that he has faith in, that can handle that while you're trying to be a CEO and oversee the big situation. You want somebody who's looking at the small parts. Sort of like on any coaching staff. You've got a manager in baseball, but you've got your pitching coach, and he's looking at the micro of each pitcher and their needs and the team needs on top of that. When you're talking football, coordinators, they handle those particular teams within the team. I think you have to have more trust in a layout of a coaching staff if you're Green to be able to do that, just like he was part of a winning machine with the Warriors, helping whatever roles he was filling at the time to make Steve Kerr a more successful coach.
So a lot of talk about maybe Collins moving on as a head coach. There's some talk that maybe even Fred Vincent, who I thought was off limits, may end up going based on the shooting this past year. The guy didn't forget how to coach shooting. It just is what it is. I think that would be a really critical mistake based on what he's been able to do in the past. How much of an overhaul do you see on this coach staff? Does it come down to if one of their or members of their staff get a job? Is that going to be the defining situation in terms of whether they're going to add new staff members, or will this happen no matter what?
Some change is going to happen no matter what, because I think Green needs it to be more successful as a head coach. But at the same time, yeah, they're going to have to react more than just act for that one need.
I mean, Mike D'Antoni was there, right?
But he wasn't
the shadows,
there.
Right.
That in the shadows. If you're not there every day, and you're not putting your hands in the dirt, so to speak, on a regular basis, and really getting to know these players, there's only so much you can see from
consultant.
film. Nobody consults or scouts purely on film. If you're not there looking at the player, looking at the interaction up close and personally, you're missing something. Pelicans need more than that for Green.
Is he a guy that comes to the bench now for them, maybe?
That doesn't sound like that's something
doesn't sound like they want, right? Or he wants.
Right, exactly. He would have done it, I think.
I think so too. Let's talk about, you talk about Valanciunas. He's going into the last year of his deal. It's an expiring contract. That is worth something in the NBA.
Yes.
Jackson Hayes has a qualifying offer. I don't see him coming back. Josh Richardson's contract expires. They got a bunch of guys on team options. Okay, so there's some flexibility there. Is it a fringe deal where they're adding a player here or there, or are they making a blockbuster deal with their draft pick with available players to be able to remake this roster, to get more athletic up front, to get those shooters, maybe to get another star in here? Because look, if both of your stars are going to miss 40 games a year, you need another star.
Right. Here's the problem, though. You pay 3 players as stars. 30 plus $1 million a year.
That is right now Ingram, Zion, and McCollum, all $33 million a year next year.
Yeah, so you can't bring in another star on that level without shipping one out.
Right.
So keep that in mind. And I don't think they're closed off to the notion, but I think it's
unless you're willing to go over the luxury tax threshold.
Right, and I think it's highly unlikely they're going to do that. And when you do bring that type of player in and you have 4 all of a sudden, you need injuries to keep guys happy as far as touches and the ability to be the man. So I don't think you want to create those new problems, because managing personalities is probably the hardest job in the NBA once you actually have talent. And with salaries come big personalities. What they need is what we talked about. Complementary players who can play defense, be athletic, and can shoot the basketball. And that means on the wings with some length, because C.J. McCollum, when he plays in particular, he's not a true point guard, but he's got to play at a spot where at least at times he's guarding other point guards. That's not ideal, but you need his shooting when fully healthy on the floor. What you need to complement that is the ability to be able to switch and match up a little bit more defensively while spreading people out on the other end. So shooters with length, more Trey Murphys. And again, this is is where you question Willie Green's coaching this past year. Why didn't Trey Murphy play more?
Right.
What was he not seeing?
Why is he not starting?
So he's not the perfect defender.
Right.
But at the same time, his shooting is vital to your success.
Right.
And when he was in games and shooting well, the Pelicans won those games. The proof is in the pudding. So he needs more players that give him more options, that maybe are better defenders than Murphy, that maybe aren't quite on the elite level as shooters, but at least above average, so that the other teams don't look at a Herb Jones, a Dyson Daniels, and others and say, oh, leave them open. We're willing to take that chance.
Right.
If teams defensively are doing that against you, that's hurting your bottom line as far as winning games.
When you look at Murphy, he's still got a couple years left on his deal, on his rookie deal. More than likely, Herb Jones is going to get a new contract this year with again, I believe a team option that they have on him, being a second-round pick. You look at, I've said they are a soft basketball team.
Yeah.
Okay? They need dogs with rings.
Sure.
They need guys that have won championships, that have championship pedigree. They don't have any of those on that team. And then, again, guys that are physical, or I don't want to say the old type 80s enforcers type, but guys that are willing to go out and scrap it up if necessary. They don't have one on those team either, on that team either.
And speaking of the injuries this past year, Larry Nance obviously wore down majorly as the season went along, to the point where he probably shouldn't have been playing much, if at all, at the end of the year. And that was your veteran, physical, lunch pail guy.
Right.
And bang, he's not the same player. He's just trying to make it through games. So having more than just one option like him would help. Now, it could be a younger player like E.J. Liddell, who was the second-round pick, who blew out the knee in the summer league. They have high hopes for the former Ohio State star, because he's 6'7", can be an inside-outside player. When you're playing positionless basketball, that helps you switch and match up even more. I hope he winds up being a useful piece, because when they're cheap like that out of the second round, like Jones, their value, you can't overstate it. But Herb Jones is a dog, though. I mean, in a good sense. You cannot have a situation where you get better, I don't think, by trading him like some people are suggesting, because he's your Draymond Green type in your hopes to build a championship team. He is part of the solution, not the problem.
I agree. I mean, look, you had a guy that was one of the best defenders in the NBA, okay?
And should have been a first or second team all-defensive player, but the team struggles, and they do hold offense against you, unfortunately. The politics of it, he didn't get voted there, which will actually help as far as his cost moving forward for the Pelicans. So as a fan, you're like, that's a shame, but it also helps the team as sad as it is.
Because he's going to be up for a contract, and they're going to make sure they have to lock him in. All right, we're going to take a break here. We come back, we'll talk some Saints. We'll touch on the Breakers as well. They're undefeated in their league. All that coming up here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Our guest today is Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com, 106.1 FM, and of course the voice of UNO basketball. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Don't move.
Air conditioning, heating, and refrigeration has been family owned and operated since 1989. Burkhardt has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhardt's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhardt's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com, 106.1 FM, all access every Tuesday, 6 to 7. And then, of course, also the voice of UNO basketball is our guest. Let's talk a really good story right now as we start off with the Saints. I think we all were kind of surprised and upset and really, again, very prayerful for Foster Morrow when we found out the former Jesuit grad, LSU grad, and of course Las Vegas Raider, as he was getting ready to sign with the Saints, they found Hodgkin's lymphoma, that he was dealing with that. Again, he's been going through his treatments, and then yesterday it was announced that the Saints are signing him, or have signed him to a 3-year, $12 million deal. $8 million of that is guaranteed, $3 million in incentives. And I had Sean Bazan on the program yesterday. The word is he's going to be ready for training camp.
Right.
Sean told me he spoke to people inside the organization yesterday that said he could be ready tomorrow.
Right.
Tomorrow.
Which is stunning for somebody that had stage 2 Hodgkin's
Right.
lymphoma. But this is an elite athlete in the best shape of his life, the best shape most people will be in their lives, in his mid-20s, so they caught it at the right time. And I think the intention, it wasn't anything he owed the Saints, because he has real value around the league. He wanted to come home and play in a situation where they needed an inline tight end who's going to play at least half the snaps, who's going to fill that role that Adam Troutman was filling not well enough. He's going to play a lot, and he's going to be a key player, particularly for a team that wants to be more consistent in running the ball, hence the draft pick of a running back in the 3rd round, as well as looking for him, because quite honestly, it's going to be very important to the team's success moving forward. And oh, by the way, the fact that he has familiarity with Derek Carr as a quarterback from the Raiders, it's a perfect fit in all ways imaginable, and really a great story on top of that.
Right. Last year, best year, 33 catches, 420 yards, 24 first down conversions, 2 touchdowns. As you mentioned, 26 years old, has played with Derek Carr. There's rapport there. Again, it goes to show you why in the draft, even though Mayer was there in the 1st round, they didn't go tight end. They didn't go tight end later. They brought in a undrafted free agent out of Central Michigan that, again, that they're going to take a look at. And then, of course, knowing behind the scenes that Troutman came to them in January and said, I want to be traded.
Right.
Okay. And then they found a trading partner, obviously, in Denver, and Sean Payton. Morrow brings a dual threat here because he is a very good blocker.
Right.
Right?
Right. That's what I'm stressing, because, yes, he's a reliable outlet receiver. Is he going to make a lot of big plays for you? No. But the fact that he's able to fill the down and dirty role that allows you to be multiple, good enough receiver that you have to pay attention to him, but will help you at the end of the line of scrimmage, can block well in space also, and was always good at that going back to his days at Jesuit. Functioned mostly as a blocker at LSU. So he's made a career out of doing it. He loves doing it, and technique-wise, he's as good as it gets doing it as far as your traditional wide tight end. And
really, again, he can catch the football as well. He has grown so much since his rookie year with the Raiders. And I watched a lot of Raider football, and just trying to watch the LSU guys, and he struggled a bit, but he has come. I mean, last year he really came into his own. Just about the right time, going into a contract year, and the fact that he's coming home and they kind of had that back in their hip pocket tells you a lot about why they went the direction they went in the draft itself.
He was able to come along slowly because he was playing behind an all-pro caliber tight end in Darren Waller, who also would get hurt enough that he would get playing time in waves, so to speak, so that he was more and more ready every time they called his number. And he's going to be used very similarly to what they used him in a very similar offense that will fit Derek Carr with the Raiders, now with the Saints.
And look, you can't say enough about, again, a security blanket for a quarterback, right? Somebody that they feel comfortable with, that if things are going awry, they can go to that player and they trust that player. For Breeze, it was Michael Thomas. Maybe it's going to be Michael Thomas again for Derek Carr. By the way, yesterday on the Rich Eisen show, the Saints head coach said that Thomas will be ready for training camp, which is huge for this team. Hopefully, again, him staying healthy. I still think they need a veteran receiver on this team, but again, again, having him as part of that lineup is going to be huge for this team if he can stay healthy.
I'm really curious to see how they're approaching that, because it could happen any day now with the veterans that are on the market. Sure-handed guys like you could obviously bring back Jarvis Landry. I think you could do better with maybe a Sammy Watkins, just another name out there that can run his routes precisely, and sure-handed receiver. I don't know if they're thinking that, though, because they might want to trust this with Thomas, also knowing the fact that they're not expecting Thomas to have to be a starting wide receiver. If he's healthy, he's going to be, but because I think they believe so much in the 2 second-year guys, obviously Chris Olave, but Rashid Shaheed as well. And to be able to use Troutman in order to get your hands on I think a falling star. I don't want to go overboard
Yes.
here, but A.T. Perry falling to the 6th round for whatever odd reasons about what Perry questioned
He's a
about
player.
he is a player. He was a consistent playmaker, the key guy in a very good offense where they would isolate him on an island and say, beat your guy, go make plays. And not only do it with his 6'3.5" height with this great length as well, but he could run routes. He could get himself open, and he wasn't even asked to run the full route tree, but you could see on the film he's capable of it. I think he's going to be able to step in the league, and if his hands are reliable, he's not a guy who has trouble catching the ball. He's a guy who gets ahead of himself and has concentration drops, thinking about the run after the catch. If he can just become a little bit more polished there as a professional, like many guys do, I think he's going to be a factor year one if he gets the snaps.
For a quarterback like Carr, though, to me, you really want to have a veteran there, okay, if necessary.
I mean, I get that. I get that. But at the same time, I look at Chris Olave as a guy who runs his routes and is a short-handed receiver who's like a veteran. He's going to catch the ball. He can run short and intermediate routes and consistently get open. I think he's going to do that. So, yes, adding Morrow is important because he's going to do that as well. And I think Juwan Johnson, I mean, he's built to do that. He re-signed him.
I agree.
So I think they're going to have those outlets. And on top of everything else, because you invested in Kendre Miller with Jamal Williams, and when Alvin Kamara plays, you're going to have much greater usage of the outlet back, the satellite back, once Kamara comes back. And I think Miller's going to surprise people as somebody who, as we get into the draft, who wasn't used as a receiver in the TCU offense, but when he was, he showed outstanding hands. I don't think there's any question that he's going to be an asset there.
I want to stay with Miller for a moment because I want to get into the draft. Look, New Orleans wanted Tajay Spears.
Right, I get it.
Okay, and there's a lot of reasons why. The Saints came out and said something about, at least there was a rumor, there was something about the knee injury, whatever. He's coming off an MCL injury, but it's the physicality, the burst, everything else that you see. And more the physicality than anything else that why they went with him rather than Tajay Spears. Is that right?
There's no doubt. The Saints are going to draft to their measurables, and there's a baseline that they're not going to go below, particularly with top two-day picks. They're not going to go with a guy with Tajay Spears with a significant injury history. He's playing without an ACL, so that already cuts down the length of his career. Doctors who work in sports immediately came out and said after the report, if that's the case, he's going to have a short career. Think Todd Gurley or shorter. So you're not going to invest in somebody who's undersized and has that issue when you can grab somebody who at the combine was 214, which means he probably plays heavier than that. He's a full-size back who does have burst to bring you the big play, who can get you the tough yardage, has great contact balance, and a lot of other folks coming out after the fact said, yeah, I had him as my third or fourth rated running back too. What you hear in all these draft analysts, blogs and YouTube videos, that's not what the league is looking at. And particularly a team like the Saints who weren't going to take an undersized back. They weren't going to take Devin A-Chain in the third round out of A&M. He's too small. He's a 180-pound guy, 85-pound guy. They're not going to take that guy. They're going to take the full-size running back because they're not going to waste a roster spot on somebody on top of drafting them in the top 100 picks of a given year on somebody who's a part-time player. They want a full-time guy.
My thought process was Kamara going out, you need another player like Kamara. Now Williams can mimic what Kamara can do. Okay, so that's why Tajay Spears, they said we need another big back. A physical back, because Mark Ingram is again probably gone. They looked for that all season long. They didn't have it last year. So again, he fills that role.
Well, they put themselves into that situation, didn't they? Because they really only wanted two full-time running backs on the roster, and they wanted a Dwayne Washington to be the third guy who's more of a special teamer, that they actually didn't want to play at significant snaps. So when you do that, you better have two durable backs at all times available in order to pull that up for what happened last year. Kamara was banged up, and we obviously saw Mark Ingram even before the injury wasn't the same player at his age, and it hurt your running game, it hurt your passing game, and in the biggest game of the year on a key play, it may have cost you the whole game.
That's no doubt about it. Brian Bresee, first-round pick, what do you think?
I think it was the right pick for the Saints. It's who I anticipated. It didn't surprise me at all that the two Clemson defensive linemen were the ones that were in that range. I think I don't know who they had ranked higher. Miles Murphy, a defensive end.
Who did you have ranked higher?
I think more of the sure thing might have been Murphy just because of production and health. But I think Bresee's issue is, look, an ACL happens, and he's well over that now. But other things like a kidney infection and the issue with his sister and having to go through that all last year, And yet, at the very end of the year, we saw the guy who was the #1 overall recruit in the country, who had a great freshman year, against North Carolina, a dynamic offense in the conference championship game, and then against Tennessee. You know how good that offense is.
Yes.
They had a #10 overall pick on the offensive line, a guy who's expected to be a first-rounder next year. He's playing on that side the whole game, wreaking havoc and making things happen, putting pressure on the quarterback. I think they put him at the 3 technique, and they let him rush the passer, and they let him build on his game from there. He's going to be at least a good part of the rotation. Again, it's all about health, but if he's healthy, year 1, Bressee's dynamic. Maybe they've gone with Murphy and thought about the defensive tackle, which was the greater need at number 40 overall. Maybe we're just guessing at this point, but I think they'd have been happy with either guy, and the way they were projecting the draft, they were hoping one of the two would be available, and it worked out.
So the red flags on the shoulder and the knee, you're not concerned?
A minor shoulder deal that had a cleanup in the offseason, not a major injury that affected him as far as a player. Look, he's a dynamic athlete. He'll get into an NFL room and they'll address the areas, and he'll either be durable or he won't be.
Right.
But you don't get a talent of his caliber who could be a real difference maker rushing the passer from the interior defensive line at number 29 if there weren't some sort of red flags there. And it just felt like to me, because of his work ethic, his character, and his talent, a risk worth taking. Playing at Clemson, not like the whole Peyton Turner deal where the production wasn't there and it was a real reach based on raw ability. This guy's a little higher level than that.
This is a Texas San Antonio in your best games against Tulane.
Exactly right.
Well, it's just
no doubt.
Still mind-blowing to this day. Really is still mind-blowing. Isaiah Foskey out of Notre Dame. Well, I tell you what, when you turn on the tape, when you watch the kid, when you listen to the kid, he's got everything you want. I mean, a lot like Cam Jordan, again, when you look at that. But with that said, there's a jump from college to pro.
Sure.
Your thoughts?
Well, he takes a beating because of the fact that he isn't what people look for, maybe a majority of NFL organizations right now. I don't know, but certainly draft analysts, you listen to them go on and think, oh, the Saints are going to take the guy from Kansas State, the guy from Iowa State, you name it, these undersized guys who don't fit the size and weight category the Saints want in their front 4. So they weren't even options as far as draft picks. This guy was an obvious fit and somebody you knew they'd be targeting. It was really between him and Keon White from Georgia Tech, another big, he's like 285 pounds type defensive end that would fit what the Saints want to do. What you like about Foskey is that he can get better with using his hands and diversifying his pass rush moves, but he got away with what he does well, which is using that long, strong arm because of his length and being a bully on the edge because it was successful. And he has a nonstop motor, like so many of these draft picks, team leader type. And he reminds me not so much of Cam Jordan, but we've heard the comparison more and more since the draft. He does have a lot of the same skill set as Will Smith. And if you get a Will Smith out of that, is anybody going to complain?
No, nobody's going to complain about that at all. Is he a year 1 plug and play?
I don't think he has to be, but I think he's equipped to be able to play a lot of snaps right away. I think
so. He's in the rotation.
He's in the rotation for sure. And I think it comes down to, is Peyton Turner going to be on this roster come first game of the regular season? I think a lot of pressure is on him because there are 5 defensive ends now in that building that are counting a draft pick, a second-round pick who's going to be on the roster and play, and a Hall of Famer in Cam Jordan. You've got to beat out those other guys for snaps, or do you stick around? That's going to be the real story of training camp to watch at that position for me, because I think Foskey will be at least a useful, solid rotation player in year 1.
Nick Salaveri, the offensive tackle out of Old Dominion, the vision for him is to move inside at the guard position. He's played all positions on the offensive line. Your thoughts?
Well, it makes sense because he's somebody who probably has a greater upside as one of those projected players to move from a tackle position in college inside to guard. He doesn't have the elite arm length, so that hurts him despite his overall size and length and good footwork playing on the edge. That's why at the Senior Bowl they played him at guard, they played him at center. Now, he's going to have to work hard in order to be ready to be useful year 1 playing the interior because he doesn't have a lot of snaps there, but he does have the skill set that you look for. He's a very intelligent player. I went back and watched a couple of interviews with him, and just the understanding of what you need to do and being quick-minded. You can't be quick-footed. You can't be a quick reactionary player in order to deal with the twists and the stunts and the different moves of different rushers you're going to be blocking if you're not quick mentally first, and he clearly has all that along with the type of elite athleticism in other areas that I understand why the Saints were so aggressive to get up to the top of the 4th. A lot of people that I respect had him graded as a top 100 pick, and if he'd have played at Virginia instead of Old Dominion, he probably would have been.
And of course, a need, especially with, again, both your guards on one-year deals.
Yeah, I mean, we know it's a huge need, and we knew it was an area that we're going to look to address as somebody that could develop, and in a year, hopefully, be somebody who's really competing to be a starter. Because rejecting the fifth-year option on Cesar Ruiz made sense. You don't want to guarantee 14 million spot up. It hurts your cap.
Yeah.
And the flexibility of let's just watch and see. We can always re-sign him if he has another good year and proves that he can stay healthy. And the real issue is Andrus Peat. I don't think they want him in that salary on this roster a year from now. Saldiveri probably has a beeline set up for him to take that job if he's good enough.
The vision for Penning, if he stays healthy, is it left guard? I mean, sorry, left tackle?
It has to be left tackle. That's what they drafted him for. But at least, you know, people don't want to hear this, but at least there is the potential that moving him inside is a possibility. If he winds up being an all-pro guard and you got that 19th overall, that's not the worst
and you just
scenario
worry about
in
his
the world.
feet with, again, defensive ends, the speed on the outside.
He's got to prove that he's technique sound because he's a big, massive player. And there are players in the league like Orlando Brown who have proven they can do that and play left tackle. He has yet to do it because he just ran over people, just trucked people on the FCS level. That's a big jump up, and he missed a lot of those snaps you would have liked him to have had last year because of the unfortunate preseason injury. Certainly wasn't his fault, and then he gets banged up again and needs surgery at the end of the year.
What do you think about Haener, the quarterback out of Fresno State?
Well, I mean, he's a Drew Brees clone in every way.
He just sure seems like it, right?
I mean, he wears the number. He said he emulated him, and then you watch his game and you can see it. But he has elite accuracy and feel, anticipation.
Everything you need, right, as a quarterback.
Everything you need. Everything that Ian Book didn't have, and it made you scratch your head if you actually watched Notre Dame and there were some people in this market, including friends of mine, that were advocating the pick. I'm like, I've watched him. He's not an NFL quarterback. I know he's hanging on at the end of the roster in Philly, but they just drafted another quarterback, Tanner McKee, who will beat him out. Watch. You knew that wasn't going to work, but to play the quarterback position, you've got to be able to play the quarterback. You can't just be an athlete who you think, oh, if we can teach him. No, you drafted a guy who's going to at least, I think, be a long-time NFL backup and maybe surprise and be a whole lot more because mentally he's as sharp as it gets. As polished as he appears in interviews, that's how he is in the huddle, pre-snap, and then throwing and anticipating and throwing to spots. He's a great fit for what the Saints do, and I'm not surprised they picked a guy who had the same traits as the greatest player in the franchise's history.
Well, it does a knock. They say maybe doesn't have the arm strength, but neither did Brees.
I don't buy that. I look at the video and I say the #1 overall pick, Bryce Young compared to him. I'm not so sure that Bryce Young has any more arm strength or maybe even a little less throwing the deep ball. His deep balls seem flatter than when Haener has lofted a deep ball down the field and dropped it in the bucket. I don't think he has a problem with that or the zip at all. And when you throw with anticipation to spots just like Drew Brees, it doesn't matter as long as you're on the money.
That's right. Jordan Howden is an interesting pick. Physical safety, could come down and play in the box if you need him to. But again, much like Foskey, great special teams player.
Right, and that's huge because you're looking 5th round and saying, can I draft somebody that I know is going to be useful? And it does start with special teams when you start talking about the last 3 rounds most of the time. Maybe not so much with A.T. Perry, but that was a luxury item that they grabbed later. With Howden, they had a vision, had a top 30 visit with him, a guy who was a walk-on, but an elite athlete, an NFL athlete who wound up having to play right away as a true freshman and wound up playing 5 full seasons.
In a physical conference, right?
A physical conference all over the secondary. And the thing that stands out about him, you don't like that he didn't make so many plays on the ball that it was eye-popping like the guys drafted in front of him at the position. What you love is he's the most sure tackler of any safety in the draft. And that's what they're looking for. Can this guy go in and play when we need him to play and not screw up? The whole term of being a safety is last line of defense. A sure tackler is what you want there. And if he's more comfortable in the roles they ask him to play defensively rather than bouncing around constantly like Minnesota did because of their needs, maybe he becomes more of a player who makes plays with anticipation. But he can play in the slot, he can play free or strong safety, 500-plus snaps on special teams, core special teamer. It's a no-brainer type of pick, and that's why where some people projecting him as a 6th or 7th round pick, the Saints said he's more valuable than that because of the upside and what we know we can get out of him right away.
I 100% agree with everything you said.
He's making the team.
Yeah, I think he is. I don't think there's any doubt. I think if people are going to be watching him now, rookie minicamp going on right now. It'll be going on through the weekend, and of course we'll find out more as we go forward. Undrafted free agents you like that have a chance of making this team. You know, I'm going to ask you about Nick Anderson first.
Sure, Nick Anderson You love to make the comparisons to Sam Mills at 5'9", and the fact that he pulled out the Sam Mills jersey with the tweet.
But I loved him at Tulane, man.
He was a fantastic player, sideline to sideline player. Look, he's going to be a hard guy who is, when you look at him in preseason and training camp, I think he's going to shine, and it's going to be hard to keep him off the roster if he plays well on special teams.
Right.
I don't know what his ceiling is, but undrafted free agent becomes a valuable backup that you don't have to fear putting in the game from scrimmage.
And becomes a core special teams player.
That would be fantastic. Sure, he has the ability to do that. Mark Evans from Arkansas Pine Bluff. I really think that he's one of those gems that you find. Another guy who played tackle, but at his size, you know he's not a tackle. He's going to be an interior offensive lineman. I would be surprised if he's at the minimum, not on the practice squad. He might make the roster because if he transitions quickly, he's got elite quickness without being in a high-level college or NFL weight room yet that can help him reshape his body. His technique, his quickness, and his energy level to be able to get to the next level and block are there. I'm excited about him. And you mentioned the tight end, Joel Wilson, another one of those guys they gave a big guarantee out of Central Michigan. He gets drafted late if it weren't for an injury this past season. And he fits the mold of somebody that could be your backup to Juwan Johnson, but more of a true tight end at 240 pounds. He was a really good receiver, and some of his best highlights were against FBS teams. Had a touchdown against LSU on an easy play, but made big plays against teams like Penn State for them. That proved that he can be a playmaker at the next level if he develops. I love that pickup.
We got a couple minutes left. I want to ask you, Saints have $16 million to spend post-draft free agency. Give me the positions that you think they will fill with that money.
Well, I mean, some of it's already gone. I don't know if that counts the contract now for Foster.
Right, it does not yet, not as of yet.
Right. So other than that, you mentioned a veteran receiver. I think you can pick one of those guys up cheap. It's not going to cost you very much just to have another guy come in and compete. That would make a whole lot of sense because of the Michael Thomas question marks. I think they could use a little bit more help at defensive tackle. There's still a few names out there, veteran guys who have produced in the league. Just bring them in to compete.
I mean, Akeem Hicks is out there.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Ioannidis is somebody that stands up.
Right. Yeah.
He would be a really nice fit here. Was good with Carolina last year, was good with Washington. He's had a solid career, and he's shown he can rush the passer a little bit. And I think they could use that. Those two stand out in particular, and it wouldn't hurt to see somebody like Aquan Alexander back in Saints colors. Just to have one more veteran linebacker, because after your two main starters were going to play most of the snaps, so many question marks. That's why it's wide open for a guy like Nick Anderson to be able to make the team, because nobody has a roster spot locked up outside of the first two.
Right. Tonight is the schedule release for the NFL. I'll just go through this quickly. Saints, look, they say it's the second easiest schedule in the league. I don't buy any of that because we have no idea what teams are going to be.
Right.
But what we do know is that they will play. They will play outdoors 4 times next year. Carolina, Green Bay, New England, and Tampa. There was a leak today that said the Green Bay game is in September. If that's the case, that's one cold weather game out the window, and then of course New England would be the other. Every other game is played indoors, so that works in their favor.
And I don't even worry about that anymore. Remember last year at Cleveland?
In Cleveland, right?
Yeah, I mean, they outplayed the Browns in horrible winter conditions. So, and because they're looking more to fortify their ability to run the football and be physical, I think they'll be fine there. The thing that stands out schedule strength-wise, though, is it shows you that you're in a far weaker conference, the NFC, and you're in the weakest division in that weaker conference. The Saints should win double-digit games this year, and if they don't, major changes must happen.
There's no way you hold on to your head coach, to the regime, if that happens. I agree.
How do you not win that division, looking at it right now?
There's no way, especially with rookie quarterbacks or anything else. Come on. And you spent the money on yours. I agree with you 100%. Like an encyclopedia of knowledge. I told you this when we started. Jude Young, CrescentCitySports.com. Also, all access on 106.1 FM, 6 to 7 on Tuesdays, as well as the voice of UNO basketball. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
All right, thanks so much for tuning in. So many ways to catch our program now. Again, you can go to there's a QR code on your screen right now. Click it with your phone. It'll take you to my website, ericasher.com, or the WLAE-TV YouTube page. And then, look, easiest way, set your DVR for your favorite time slot. You'll never miss the program. We hope, again, that you'll do that for us. All right, catch me on the Sports weekdays, 106.1 FM Nash Icon. You can listen at ericasher.com, the 106.1 website, also iHeartRadio app, TuneIn Radio, our digital platforms. We're on Apple, Spotify in terms of our podcast, but our podcasts are on all podcasting platforms. Thanks to the WLA production staff and also to our underwriters for making this show possible. And of course, the WLA production staff includes Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Logan Graffia, also Alex Chacon, Isabella Bagnito, and of course our director, William Hill. For Jude Young, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.